So what if the company that gave us ChatGPT just dropped a blueprint to, well, completely remake society? Because that's pretty much what just happened. OpenAI released this massive policy paper. And let me tell you, this isn't about a better chatbot. This is about a future that could totally reshape our world. And they're saying it starts right now. I mean, just look at some of the ideas they're floating. A 4-day work week as standard, a public fund that pays you a dividend from AI profits, getting automatic financial support the second AI disrupts your job. It all sounds a little like science fiction, right? But OpenAI is arguing this is our very near future. So here's the big question. Is this a genuine roadmap to a better world powered by AI? Or is it just a really smart PR move from a company that wants to write the rules for a game they're already winning? In this explainer, we're going to break down their blueprint, dig into some major critiques, and get right to the heart of this whole debate. All right, so to understand the plan, you have to get where they're coming from. You have to grasp their core premise. They believe we're way past talking about better chatbots. We're talking about a fundamental shift in the course of human history. Okay, so their whole argument really hinges on this idea. They're saying we're at a historical inflection point. Think the Industrial Revolution or the New Deal. Something so big it requires a complete overhaul of our social contract. They believe that AI surpassing human intelligence is going to demand nothing less. And listen, they're not talking about some far-off, distant future. When OpenAI's leadership says the transition has begun, they're not just thinking out loud. They're basically firing a flare gun into the sky, signaling that it's time to act and to act now. So what's actually in this new social contract they're proposing? Well, it really boils down to two main categories: a massive economic overhaul and a whole new framework for safety and oversight. The economic part is this big 4-step plan. First up, they want to shift taxes away from people's paychecks and onto things like corporate profits and capital. Step 2, create a public wealth fund to give every single citizen a direct share of AI's success. Step 3, build these adaptive safety nets that kick in automatically when jobs disappear. And finally, use all this new AI efficiency to give us all more free time. Sounds good, right? Now, beyond the money, the paper gets into how we manage the risks. They're talking about containment playbooks for a rogue AI, a public group for reporting near misses, and this one is pretty controversial, restricting who can get their hands on the most powerful models. They even propose something called a right to AI, arguing that access to these tools should be like a public utility available to everyone. Okay. But this blueprint was out for about 5 minutes before people started pointing out some pretty fundamental flaws. The proposals sound amazing, but the big question becomes, who's actually being asked to do all this work? One of the sharpest critiques comes from another AI founder, Christina DiGiacomo, and she points out that OpenAI has basically laid out this incredible, ambitious to-do list for everyone else. While governments and society have to rebuild everything, OpenAI's only job on the list? Just keep building the very tech that's causing all the disruption. DiGiacomo put it perfectly. She said, "You diagnose the disease and assign the treatment to the patient." In other words, critics are saying the document does a great job describing the problem, but then it hands the prescription to someone else to fill. It's like they're neatly passing the cleanup job to the rest of society. And another huge blind spot people pointed out, the whole plan is reactive. It suggests we measure AI's impact after people have already lost their jobs. And you have to ask, wait a minute, why aren't we using the world's most powerful predictive technology to get ahead of the problem? Why not use AI to find and retrain people before they're out of a job? And remember that right to AI? Well, critics totally dismantled that idea too. A real right, like clean water or education, isn't something you buy. They argue that what OpenAI is really proposing is just cheaper access to their own commercial product. As Diajomo says, it's not a right, it's ethics washing dressed up as a subscription with better PR. Ouch. But the critiques actually go even deeper than just who's doing the work. There's a massive piece of the puzzle that seems to be missing from the blueprint entirely, the very group that holds our social safety net together. You see, OpenAI talks a lot about strengthening the social safety net, but what even is that system? It's not just some government program. It's much more than that. As nonprofit leader Dan Kershaw explains, you should think of the safety net as a 3-legged stool. You've got government policy, government funding, and then the third leg, nonprofit delivery. When people are in crisis, they don't just get a check in the mail. They walk into food banks, into shelters, and those are run by nonprofits. If you take away that third leg, the whole system just collapses. And this highlights this really bizarre disconnect.
OpenAI's own foundation funds and works with tons of nonprofits. They talk all about building with, not for communities. But then you look at this huge policy paper, the master plan, and the entire nonprofit sector is just reduced to a vague mention of non-governmental institutions. They're never even named.
And this points to a deeper kind of troubling issue, right? The very people closest to human need are seen as important enough to get funding from, but not important enough to actually include in the blueprint for the future. The people who are on the front lines every single day are left out of the room where the plan is being written.
All of this brings us to the final and maybe the most important critique of OpenAI's entire plan. It's a question that goes way beyond specific policies and gets right to the very heart of the matter: power. And this brings us to the most fundamental critique of all, captured perfectly by one observer who said this: it is a document that thinks carefully about how to share the harvest and barely at all about who owns the farm. The paper is filled with great ideas for sharing the financial rewards after all the wealth has been created and concentrated. But it's incredibly weak on ideas to stop that concentration from happening in the first place, or how to spread out control over this world-changing technology. In short, it wants to share the harvest, but it has no interest in talking about who owns the farm. So in the end, OpenAI has absolutely succeeded in starting a massive and frankly a necessary conversation. But that's all it is, a start. It's a first draft, written by the people with the most to gain. And the real question it leaves us with is this: who else gets a seat at the table to help write the final version of a social contract that's going to affect every single one of us?